I'd like to welcome everybody to the inaugural Youth Education in Engineering and Architecture event. I am extremely pleased that we have been able to finally get this space and time together with a really wonderful array of professionals in the industry of educating prior to getting into the university sector, which is currently the main area that's recognised in design and architecture in particular, and engineering. And we're really excited about the opportunity to look at how we're going to improve this and how we're working together in many different areas, and we can actually try and develop an even stronger practice in this respect, to be able to share ideas and understand what for other aspects we can integrate into our practice. I'm Cheryl Polina-Reeves, qualified architect, head of Learning Tree at TEDi London, which is delivering the Global Engineering Design course this year, and also founder of Archimake. So there's lots of different areas which we're straddling, architecture, engineering, different levels of age groups, and we're really excited for the conversation to be crossing all boundaries in order to be as inclusive as possible today. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Victoria Thornton. Victoria is the founder of Open House London and also Open House Worldwide, and also Open City's Ladder of Learning. She's the president of the AA and now founder of the newly established Thornton Educational Trust. Its purpose being to upscale the existing body of practitioners and organisations so we can truly create more opportunities for people to engage with the built environment from a young age, and raise a more diverse and design-conscious public, interested and invested in improving their neighbourhoods and towns for the future. Victoria has also been awarded an OBE. She's the Honourable Fellow of the RBA and an Honourable Masters of London Metropolitan University for contribution to architecture and education. And I'd like to hand over to Victoria.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for inviting me to say a few words in advance of actually lots of great examples of projects that are going to go and be talked about, actually either taking place now or you're actually developing. So I think this will give a real insight in how design is being introduced and how an understanding and passion for the built environment is being developed in children and young people. However, I'm going to say this, maybe because I've been doing it, been involved in it for quite a while. It's been a long road to get to this point, because actually, you know, it was acknowledged recognised quite a long time ago, but it's really finally being acknowledged, and that needs to be, that's great and great news for all of us, but particularly the young people and children. So there are many areas I've been involved in through, as we call it, the ladder of learning, through primary school, secondary school, accelerating to university, My City 2. We have many programs, but one of the key things is there often could be one-off programs, and I think one of the things I'll slightly talk about is how you ensure it's embedded. So though it has been a long road, but I think we're there, and I think there's a sort of zeitgeist going on, and I think it's a confluence of a number of things going on in society as a whole. But our step change, I think, comes in many forms, however, and you will see this from the speakers this evening. I think you're all, you know, they'll all be reflecting the different approaches. So I'm not going to even try and outline any of those. You'll be doing it much better. But so I'm just sort of coming a bit further out and saying, I think when we look at access, well, we're not looking at just about widening access to the profession. So engaging people in the profession, in education, into the schools of architecture, etc., is one part. But I think the access is really is about reflecting the society, and so going into people going into the profession is at last widening that diversity, the access, and actually maybe at last creating a proper reflection of our society within our professions. As we know, it did take a while for women to get to that point, but and I'm hoping this is quicker than that point. Of course, the access into the profession is really important, but as we can currently see from the professionals and educators, it's also sort of, I'm going to call it a professional activism going on. And I think that is what the change is young architects and engineers and just the built environment professionals and others are actually recognizing there's something more as well, and they want to be part of that. So I think there's, when we're talking about education for children and young people, I think there's sort of 3 areas we tackle. Widening access, as sort of mentioned above. Another one is how to bring architecture to the attention of children and young people through participatory community engagement projects. And that's providing them with the tools to be more actively involved, having a say in shaping actually their local environment, and having, I would say, a social as well as a physical impact on their community. So when we bring architecture, or the built environment, I often call it, in these different forms, it actually is having an extra impact. It's not just about skilling up to widening the profession by diversity. And of course, the other area is embedding it in creativity within the school curriculum, which I know Neil will, I'm sure, talk about it later on. But it is through embedding creativity through design, architecture, engineering, and providing the tools for in this way, critical thinking, ideas development, problem solving, etc. A lot of the skills you need in life, and just really feel that this area that we're in actually can really help to do that. As Cheryl said last week, we launched our organisation with the topic of inspiring future generations and how to go about this, and how is really important for us. But it came really quickly clear that inspiring future generations meant different things to different people, therefore showing a real complex landscape in which we operate. And I think we can't underestimate, we have a massive landscape that we're all involved in. And it means we take our decisions or our own practice, we take it in different forms and create different types of programs. None are any different, better or worse from each other. It's just, it is such a wide landscape we operate in. And it also showed we can tackle some of these areas as individual organisations. Again, like today, we can see many here. Some of it is in our direct control, and some of it isn't. And I suppose I'm thinking here of Department of Education when we're talking about the curriculum. That's a subject in itself. And again, Neil and I have often talked about that, and with many others as well. But where we can show in 2 areas, i.e. the education, bringing diversity in the profession by bringing opportunities for young people to get into the higher education system, and hence why we developed one with Bartlett on accelerating into university. And the second one is community engagement, leading, I would say, to social impact. And why I bring that up today is because a lot of the work we're doing actually encompasses both areas as such. But I also think it's something that stakeholders, and when I mean stakeholders, I can mean local authorities, it can be developers, it can be contractors, it can even be financial companies who give money to property development. They could be doing a lot more, being actually involved in embedding within their own organisation through sort of usual corporate social responsibility. So they are creating programs that are ongoing programs, not just programs that reflect something they're creating, like a new development or their development strategy. So it's really saying they are part of the built environment too, and they should be part of this education process as well. And what was also interesting was in some of the feedback was from planners and local authorities. And I thought that was really interesting because we sometimes forget the planners when we're talking about creativity, but of course they are part of the placemaking. So we see that as an opportunity to explore a bit more. But maybe I actually digress too much from today's discussion. As I said, really the important bit is the how to go about this step change. And again, we're here some examples. But what I personally, and I suppose I've been in this area for about 25 years now, is that it's really gratifying that the professionals all are taking up the gauntlet, really taking it up, and in different ways. And of course, I have to say, Cheryl and Archimake, determination and energy, I would say, is develop sustainable programs is one example. But again, we have many more here today. Our organisation has decided, though, the best way we can help with this and help support it is to recognise and celebrate, actually, those individuals and organisations like here today, and through award scheme. I would say it's a very simple award scheme. We don't want it a big Park Lane or anything like that. It's really, and it's a national. So we can do this in encouraging others to do the same. So it's a way of capacity building, encouraging others. We also think of collecting best practice because we can all learn from each other. So not just always reinventing the wheel, and we can all do that because it's really enjoyable, but actually spending our time developing new programs. So we are building up, as it were, sort of a data bank of how you can approach this. And maybe the last bit is to embed this approach in the DNA of all practices. And I'm talking about built environment, architectural practices, engineering practices, in companies and local authorities. So it isn't a one-off idea, it just becomes the norm. Everybody is saying it's part of our practice, our DNA, this is what we will always do. This is one of our purposes as an organisation, as a company. And I think if we did that, we wouldn't be needing to shout out about what we're doing now. So we hope within our way, and that is really to support all of you and others, that we can do this, I would call it a small action, which hopefully will create a big impact. And I suppose I use that from open house, a small idea, opening up buildings has had a major impact around the world. So we want to create a sort of climate whereby it's normal to engage in this form of activism. And I keep coming back to that word, and movement springs up as well, but let's say activism of inspiring future generations. Obviously be children, young people, or in future, indeed future architects and engineers. So lastly, to remind ourselves, because all of us in this room know the built environment has a huge impact on our health and well-being, and our relationship with place is fundamental to our day-to-day cultural experience, in turn shaping our sense of identity and our attitude actually to our environment, ourselves and each other. So that is how I see, and I'm sure all of us see, the importance of why we make this effort, and see so much going on now, but it'd be great to see so much more in the future. So thanks very much for listening.
I was on mute, sorry. Thank you very much, Victoria. That was lovely. I completely agree with what you've said. And I'm so glad that we are going to be touching on some of those different points that you've made throughout the session today. So that's a great starting point for our talk. Thank you. So next I'd like to go to Finley Johnson, who's an RBA Part 1 architectural assistant currently working at Foster & Partners, and he's about to finish his Masters in Architecture. And he has a keen interest in sustainable design and wants to help ensure ecologically minded design principles are learned from a young age. His interest in education has been explored in his Masters, where he has studied educational theory. His own experiences of creative learning helped him work with his dyslexia. Therefore, he has experienced himself the positive effects of non-curricular activities. And Finn is also an Archimake workshop leader. So Finn, I'd be very happy for you to take the stage and share your slides.
Hi Cheryl, I'm just going to be talking today, but thank you
Okay,
for handing over
thank
to me. You've also bumped me up. I'm only an assistant, but I've been working under Anna, but thanks for that. I obviously valued. um, yeah, so as Cheryl said, I've been working with Archimate just for a term, and I've been working as an assistant. And today I'm going to be talking about fun as a tool for engagement. So I've just recently finished writing my thesis this year, and I've also wrote it on political activism. And one of the things that became really apparent through writing this was that often in architecture in particular and in the built environment, we have the technologies to sort of combat some of the worst effects of climate change, but actually what we don't have is the political will. And to overlap with what was just said by Victoria, one of the big challenges, I think, is kind of creating this cultural change that is needed. So I think one of the really great things about Archimake is that it's kind of taken that next step, and where maybe some large companies might sort of fund children or fund educational systems, they could potentially be using that as a way of sort of sidestepping the real issue, which is generating that cultural change. And I think whereas Archimake and Cheryl have kind of tackled that issue head on and are really engaging with young people to create a new wave of architects and children who are more engaged from a younger age. And hopefully we'll see in the future Archimake branch out a little bit further. So yeah, the kind of way that we create fun as a tool for engagement within Archimake is using sort of multimedia. We might teach them software in some lessons, and then craft in others. And this is a way of kind of offering the children an opportunity to experience different forms of learning. And then just kind of to round off with a note from Cass Holman, who's a famous toy designer. She describes unstructured opportunities as being the key to successful play amongst children. And I think that what Archimake offers is something which is outside the normal structure of learning, and therefore hopefully will give children the creative opportunities to flourish and go on to be sort of the best version of the person that they can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Finn. That was great. And I really appreciate your reflection on the curriculum. I think that's really valuable, because we're all kind of aware of that constraint, and your take on the workshops and how it's improved your understanding is really helpful. We're next going to go on to Katie Van Dawson. Katie is an RBA Part 1 architectural assistant at Grimshaw and Partners, and also an Archimake workshop leader. Sorry, she's a Part 2 Archimake architectural assistant at Grimshaw and Partners. Apologies, Katie, for that.
Really bumped down.
Yeah, and she's been with Archimake in various ways, working with the education creation, and also as workshop leader now. So hand over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen with you all. So I hope that's working. Hello everyone, I'm Katie. I have been with Archimake for 6 months now, and I started kind of working behind the scenes as an education assistant, and I was then moving on this term to become an workshop assistant, and then on to becoming a workshop leader. And I think what was interesting was the fact that I had gone through this kind of whole transition of going from kind of creating the presentations for the workshops to more kind of leading the workshops. And what was particularly interesting was when I was leading the workshop, I was working with a group that was a mixed ability group. So this is what I'm going to touch on today in this very short presentation. I'm going to be looking at teaching design to mixed ability groups and the importance of rewards. So in the context of the workshop that I was teaching 3 children. one of whom had been with Archimake for 2 years, one of whom who had kind of 1 year experience, and one child who had no years of experience with Archimake. So there was quite this diverse range of skills, I guess, and also ages within this. So the child who had 0 years of experience also was slightly younger at 6 years old, and the other 2 children were both 11. So alongside kind of being a range of abilities, there was also kind of this age range difference, which was really interesting for me and kind of quite a daunting prospect to take on. So I was kind of teaching a workshop that I didn't want to be too fast for some children and too slow for other children. So one of the first techniques that I looked at was kind of creating leveled up challenges to try and kind of help the children that were slightly more experienced to feel that they had a challenge. And I think what was interesting was when I introduced this within the workshop, some of the children who were slightly less experienced thought, maybe I can take on this challenge, you know, I want to do this. And what was interesting was that they actually kind of came out of it doing just as well as the child who was slightly or had double the amount of experience to them. And I think this for me kind of gave this interesting question of kind of not only how should workshops be focused towards mixed abilities, but also how do we assess a design ability, and whether this should be something that I as the workshop leader decides or the child decides for themselves. And another technique that I used in the workshop was quite a common one, and it was kind of getting one of the children to help out another child. So one of the children who, for example, knew how to use SketchUp, which is an architectural modeling software, and knew how to use one of the tools that another child didn't maybe. And so that child then was teaching another child, and in that way that they were clarifying for themselves, as well as this child kind of being able to learn from another child. And I think the online teaching, which is what we were doing, the workshops that were kind of over Zoom, it was kind of an opportunity for this to be used even more. So the children could kind of show or share their screen with another child. And in that way, the other child could see on kind of a large screen how to do something. And one of the second techniques that I used was using games or opinions. So for kind of a mixed ability group, sometimes some of the children got a little bit frustrated and found the task more difficult than the other children. And so I wanted a way to kind of put all of the children on a similar level playing field. And by introducing a game or opinions, which kind of broke up the lesson. So for example, kind of the first person who could find a picture of a Zaha Hadid building and put it as their background in this way, it was kind of more about speed rather than knowledge. And it also was able to kind of stimulate discussion. So from the precedent, we were able to ask them kind of how they liked it, what parts they liked, whether they thought that it worked in the setting. And so it kind of stimulated a lot of interesting discussions from that. And another technique that I used slightly later on in the term was to do mini presentations. And this was slightly different to the end of term presentations that some of you may have seen with Archimake. So these were kind of at the end of each workshop, each child would have a time to kind of present their own work. And in this way, they were able to kind of practice their communication skills. And it kind of gave each child the ability to talk about their work and for me to give individual pointers and targets for the next week. So each child felt that they had their own targets to achieve rather than kind of targets that may be slightly too advanced for here and now kind of situation. So that works quite well. And also rewards. I think for a mixed ability group, obviously the outcomes would be quite varied at some points. So to give rewards to children in the form of kind of the worker of the week or the Archimake star of the week allowed me to kind of give the children reward for the process rather than the final outcome. So whether they had a difficult period throughout the lesson and then they were able to overcome it, and then to get a reward at the end of it, you could kind of see their faces light up, which was really nice. And I thought it might be appropriate to show some of the spring term Star of the Weeks. So just to summarize, I think mixed ability kind of reflects a more real life situation where children are gaining skills in kind of teaching others or potentially listening to people of different abilities. So I think it really reflects a more real life situation. I think welcoming an environment where each child feels like they have their own specific elements to focus on, I think is really important, so they don't feel like they're kind of running after something that is not necessarily at their level here and now. And I think for me, avoid assuming that all design abilities is to do with years of experience. I think in practice it's sometimes about kind of the best idea that is the one that is brought forward, so not always about kind of the years of experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That was really engaging, and I hope we have some interesting comments about that, because I think the aspect of real life and the age not being related to abilities is very key. It's even related to one of the projects which we did this term, which happened to be related to the Art Anti-Pavilion 2021, and they chose sharks for the last winning project, which wasn't really what many people expected, and wasn't really what you'd expect a grown-up architectural project to look like. So it just shows you that you know, innovation is the key in design. So thank you, Katie. So the next speaker is Katja de Haas, and Katja de Haas is the founder and director of Katja de Haas Architects. It's a small office that runs the Giant Dolls House project, a collaborative arts project which raises awareness of the importance of a home and community for all. With the Dolls House project, Katja has worked with Oxfam, the housing and homelessness charity Shelter. And I'd like to now hand over to Katja. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll share my screen now. First of all, thank you for having me. And I see a lot of points from the previous two speakers, which I think can also be looked at the Dolls House. For example, fun as a tool for engagement and unstructured activities and helping out. The Giant Dolls House project is a social arts project, and it engages people, anyone, and it's not only for children, in making dolls houses in a shoebox any way they want to. So it is essentially a really free project. The box represents the imagination, feelings, or message of the participants. The idea is that every participant can engage with the project in a way they feel comfortable with, and they can gel with. The individual boxes are linked with ropes, ramps, and ladders into a community of dolls houses. This community, ideal or imaginary, can be a starting point for conversations and stories about issues that sometimes are divisive or can be difficult to discuss. So that's why I've worked with Oxfam, we've worked with refugees. The overall message of the project is very simple. In order to be part of a community, you need, part of the Dolls House community, you need a shoebox. In the created community, all boxes are different, just as in real life, all people really are idiosyncratic, and it's really important that everybody is part of discussions in a community. This is the last project we did. Richard Sennett says, "My hope is that understanding material craftsmanship and social cooperation can generate new ideas about how cities might become better made. My quest is to relate," he continues, "how people shape personal efforts, social relations, and the physical environment. I emphasize skill and competency, but because in my view, modern society is de-skilling people in the conduct of every life." So the project is very much about making, and just making with objects that are available and with glue, and people just by making, they can develop their ideas and their shoe boxes. The educationalist Audrey Rule identified 6 themes when she observed children play with dolls houses. She said, when they play with dolls houses, they use the imagination. They use science fictional changes in scale. So I think things can become absurd because because of scale. They encourage diversity and friendship, courage and independence, creativity, and care of belongings. So often the Doll's House project makes whatever you put in it makes very precious. This was made in one of the workshops we did in Dubai, and there were two girls came in and they made this for ages. And you can see how many details, like this is a caterpillar and the butterflies are drawn and there were feathers. We've done the project in different countries, and also we've tried to use it as ways of engaging different groups of people in different places. This was in Goa, where we worked with a wide range of people and with a lot of local charities and organizations. One was Bookworm, which is a local charity that reads to children, and but we also worked with local women, with young mothers, but also with tourists, everybody to make one Doll's House. This is a 7-year-old girl, and we asked everybody, what is Goa? What does Goa mean for you? So we don't ask leading questions. We try to keep the questions open so everybody can engage at their own level. And this little girl said she made, these are all her favorite things in Goa, which is a palm tree, a sofa, a TV, and her doll, and a swing. Then we went to Zatari, and we worked with the residents of the Zatari camp in Jordan. And we asked, we were with Oxfam, and we asked all participants what they wanted people in London to know about them. So we didn't ask them to engage with home or their home. And some people, adults and women and children all participated. Some told stories about their life in the camp. Some told stories about the imagination they had. There was a girl who made a fashion shop, and these two boys made a living room that has table chairs, a water tank, and a battery generator. They were all very busy, and they both want to have a room like that one day. Then in London, we had other children making dolls' houses, which were in response to those, and they all came together in an installation. This project was to raise awareness for what was happening in Zatari. And Oxfam said that through the making of the dolls' houses, people told a lot of stories they would not have told otherwise, which then sort of helped the campaign and the raising awareness afterwards. Last year, we were going to do another project, but then COVID happened, so we went virtual, and we did a virtual giant doll's house project, and we asked people to submit a picture of their doll's house through the website. So whereas first we had all the activities as a shared, like people were making doll's houses together. Now all of a sudden you couldn't see people making doll's houses, and they just submit, and everybody told about their own experience in lockdown. And we had about 170 people participating. And this is a girl who's called Pia, and she said, there are lions in my room. I like to play in my jungle room. This was a girl called Poppy, and she says, this is almost a little bit of her text. She says, my brother wears the energy suit, which includes food, sweets that bring us energy and comfort. This was at the beginning of lockdown. My dad wears the protein suit, which is designed to bring strength in this difficult time. Both are placed on the hazmat suit and include my fear fabric, which was created from the corona headlines. My box specifically shows how the virus has infiltrated and encompassed every aspect of our lives, the news, our meals, our enslavement to technology, and our state of boredom. On a more positive note, it also shows family unity and the fact that we're all going through this strange time together. This was a 17-year-old girl. Last year, the refugees did not participate, but this boy did, because not everybody was feeling like making dolls' houses, of course. And he says, I'm seeking asylum in the UK. Now everyone else understands lockdown too. No permission to work, no space, no life, no future, just waiting. This was made by Anton. He was an Archimate student. and he wrote about his box. The reason I chose this room was because it is the room I feel most calm in. If I feel like I'm sad, this is the best room to go to. It just makes me feel really comfortable. I like reading in my bed as well as working on my desk. For some reason, it makes me feel really great and peaceful. This is why my bedroom is my favorite room. And then the last one is Lucy, and she is 8 years old, and she made the room of her doll's house bright because at my school, the motto is let your light shine and to shine bright. All these doll's houses, and this is what we sent in the end, and then they come all together and they're linked. What we often do in other installations, we have a lecture evening, and we also in Goa, for example, all the children got to visit the museum, they got a meal and everything. So it's also a way of engaging children with the arts. This is, well, we collaborate with different schools and teachers, and we often work around themes and places. There's no prize nor award for the best box, and participants are encouraged to use materials they find and do as they like. There are no good or bad boxes. They have to follow some instructions, and also we often start with showing what you can do with what materials, and then often they teach each other. By just making and thinking with their hands, participants can come to express ideas and feelings, and all boxes together make an installation of dreams, hopes, and wishes of the participants, while opening the door for larger issues to be addressed. Together making and the power of miniature narrative have made that until now the participants of all ages and backgrounds have enjoyed participating. We're now working on a new installation, Together We Care. We're going to be part of the London Festival of Architecture again. So if anyone wants to submit a doll's house, please go to our website and you can follow on Instagram. These boxes were made by a student of mine in Bournemouth, and he explored his student room and mental health the past year by looking at the effect of different lights in the room on the mood. That's the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. That was very inspiring. I love seeing that relationship between making and health and well-being. It's extremely valuable, and often something which we can overlook, that creativity does feed that. So our next speaker, we've now finished the engagement in learning and teaching design section of the evening. So now we're going to go on to online tools for learning design. And our first speaker is Anna YEEA1. Anna graduated from the Chelsea College of Art, and she studied interior and spatial design, and is currently studying her master's in education in arts and cultural settings at King's College London. She's also an Archimate workshop leader for this term. And Anna, I'd be happy to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely to see you all. My name is Anna. I'm a workshop leader at Archimate. So the topic I'm going to focus on today is called How to Succeed in Online Teaching and Learning. If you asked me the same question a year ago, I would know nothing about it. But today, I'm really happy to share with you the strategies and tips that we use in our online workshops based on my own experiences since I joined the team during a national lockdown. So in the last part, we talked about students' engagement in education, which is the key and the foundation. And that actually applies to online learning as well. For online learning, students' engagement within this virtual environment will appear very different from the school classroom. Since you will not be able to see the students in person, you have to be able to gauge students' interaction in other ways. And one of the great tips is to use the webcam. Teenage boys and girls may be shy and prevent turning their cameras on the entire time, but there's great power giving students the opportunity to see you and one another. So having intro video uploaded on the website, record a video of yourself introducing, welcome video before the session begins will be useful for the students to be more engaged. Also, allowing a free chat for the first 5 minutes can engage that peer connection. Can also give you a little bit more insight into the activities and hobbies that the students participate. Although you may not be in the same room, but students should feel a sense of community. So make time for small group work, breakout room, and relation building activities, virtual games. That keeps the human behind the text and video screen connected. Also, most importantly, smile while you talk, influence your tone of voice, and help create that welcoming atmosphere for your students. Next, utilizing the senses. Students are going to have a difficult time staying focused without getting up to move around. So encourage the students to stand and walk in place, bend over, touch their toes. It's a way we do called brain gym. Also use various types of content, images, video, audio to get attractive with the sound. Invite the student to speak out loud, also read the slide. Create spaces in breakout room, play with a virtual background and whiteboard. Make full use of the chat box for discussions or side conversations will be crucial, since students wouldn't know how to contribute if they wouldn't know all these functions available. And as educators, we also need to be familiar with all these functions. Value effort, create environments that recognize the value of the hard work. Explain to students that learning something new can be hard and that the struggle involved is a good thing to challenge students, move just beyond their comfort zone. Provide frequent effective feedback in the virtual world where students and teachers do not actually see each other. It's important to provide frequent feedback, just a simple message to the students. Thanks them for uploading their photo, their work, and ask them questions about their work. Engage them to reflect and high-level thinking throughout the session. Feedback. What did I learn today? What skill did you develop? And what did you most enjoy is the way we asked about our students by the end of each workshop. It's a great way for the student to reflect on their learning. For example, this one here, Talia said, what I think the workshop helped me to understand more about how architects make good models. And she put a smiling face next to it. Also, not only getting feedback from the student, but also from the facilitators. How could the session be improved? We have this reflective education in architecture form to fill out after every session. And finally, make connection to a wider world. Post on social media. The group I teach at Northbridge House School, they very welcoming and retweets my Twitter saying, one of many great online extracurricular clubs we're running, and clearly our Aspire Your Architects have got to grips with the 3D design software already. Thank you, Archimake, which is really lovely. So a little summary, how to succeed in online teaching and learning. For educators, these are the soft skills that are very essential to make a successful online learning workshop. And some practical tips such as get familiar with the student, engage all their senses, use the tools and functions, various types of content, and last but most importantly, be energetic and make it fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was great, because that is one of the biggest challenges that we've all had to address, which is how do we continue to make education fun when we can't even be able to, see each other in face-to-face environments. And so, the team have been developing really clever ways of making technology sort of disappear in terms of being a barrier. So that was really great. So next we have Emma Kiro-Watson, and Emma's, she's a Part 1 architecture graduate, also working in interior design, and she's been also the education team leader for Archimate, and she's going to talk on maximising effectiveness with a remote education team. So I'll hand over to you, Emma.
Hi, thanks, Cheryl. Just share my screen now. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about our kind of remote education team and how we deal with that at the moment from a kind of management and organizational standpoint, and how that's affecting the children as well. I should be touching on 3 key points. So how we manage our feedback and flexibility, how we create a kind of virtual studio environment for the team, and also how we are trying to measure our successes. So our approach to feedback at Archimate it kind of works in 2 different ways. We have this format of direct feedback that we share between the team, and this is kind of a personal and immediate way of getting feedback between us. It's as managers and team leaders literally talking to our team members, asking them how the workshop went every single day, to create that direct dialogue that's immediate. And that's kind of through formats of weekly team meetings and different phone calls and things like that. And speaking to the team in that immediate way promotes an immediate response, which allows us to actually create some real-time changes. It allows us to ask them what worked really well on this workshop and why, and where do we need to improve. It lets us kind of say, you know, for a workshop on Monday, what were the areas that the children needed help with, and then we can actually implement and action those changes for the very next day, even for a Tuesday workshop, for example. And that level of flexibility is so important in delivering an end product that the children are really enjoying and getting to grips with. And that's especially important now that we're in a remote setting. It's totally uncharted territory for a lot of people, including us, and we're dealing with more technical problems than we've been used to in our workshops, things like that. So having that feedback from the team who are actually on the ground is so vital. And then the other approach we have is kind of a remote feedback format, which is actually through the written forms that the team members fill out for us. And what those allow us to do is to create a more long-term overview of how the team is performing, you know, from week to week, workshop to workshop, how we can chart our progress as a team. And that allows us to catalogue our successes over time, and also just for us to see where we've made good improvements and how we can keep improving. And by doing this, and each individual staff member filling this out, we can also pinpoint areas for individuals to improve, and also give them praise on the areas they've already improved on, which is really important for keeping the staff engaged. If the staff feels engaged, that will come across in the workshops they deliver, and the children will feel engaged, which is really nice to see that link happen. So the second point is in us trying to create a sort of virtual studio environment. As architects, a lot of us are so familiar with this idea of a studio environment, in that it's not just somewhere you work, it's a place where you can exchange ideas, you get feedback, it's a kind of hub of creativity where you bounce your ideas off of each other. And that's something we really want to try and help promote within our team, even though we can't be together physically at the moment. Because one of the things about being in a studio is having visibility of what everyone else is up to. I'm sure we're all familiar with that kind of understanding of seeing what someone else is working on, and it kind of bouncing an idea from what you're working on, and you get that collaboration from it. But how do you promote that kind of remote visibility? We do that in a couple of ways at Archimate at the moment, and one is to kind of create feedback as an event. So we do this through team meetings, which is where the workshop staff and team are encouraged to really speak openly about how things are going and share feedback, share tips with each other. And the second way we do it is by physically seeing and sharing work, which has been absolutely fantastic. We've introduced a newsletter format where we share images of the children's work, like the ones you can see down there at the moment. We also include workshop feedback from parents and children, and also the comments actually from the team's remote feedback forms that I spoke about earlier. And what that does is it allows the team to see actually how their feedback is being valued and used and how it's being shared amongst everyone. And all of this kind of environment that we're building virtually is to try and inspire and challenge the team, and it almost creates kind of some healthy competition in a way, is that workshop staff can see what other teams have been up to and say, oh, that's children's work is amazing, I want our kids to do just as well this week, which is great. And that brings us on to how we're measuring our success and how our approach is kind of feeding those results. And again, it links back to that feedback process that we're constantly going back to, getting feedback, qualitative and quantitative, from children and parents, and then again sharing that so they can see as a team how the praise is affecting them, and how those changes are kind of getting good praise, like this comment from a child that we had, which is fantastic to see. And we also have children's work really speaking for itself. Like you can see this here, and we have this one example of a child starting with a design idea and in under 10 workshops going from this drawing to this model, which is like really amazing to see, and it's a testament to the workshop team's hard work. So kind of in summary, how we're really trying to promote this remote team is by using purpose-driven feedback, taking that to make real-time changes, and also creating an environment of team visibility and studio type kind of atmosphere. And all of that comes together so that we can recognize the team's achievements and constantly be improving to really create results that affect the children that we're working with. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was really, really insightful. And it's been a new role, which we haven't felt that we needed to have before this term. So Emma's kind of made the role her own and has done a brilliant job keeping everyone together and keeping motivated. That is the most important thing when everybody is totally separate. It's quite an amazing thing you've done. So next we have Nilda Hamchoui in this category, and Nilda's going to give us an outward-looking view, actually. Nilda's now a Part 1 architecture graduate from University of East London and is a founder of The Architectural Experiment, which is a website which shares her journey into the architectural industry. And she's also an Archimate workshop leader. So with her experience of social media, Nilda's going to now let us know how you think architecture has improved or benefited from that. So I'll hand over to you, Nilda. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just share the screen. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to look at how can social media support the broadening of architecture education. So we'll first begin by sort of defining what social media is in the broader sense. So social media is forms of media, so i.e. a website, application, or computer program that allows people to communicate and share information through a computer or mobile phone. Now, architecture is a very visual medium of communication, so social media has become an important tool for so many who want to learn about architecture before they reach a formal architectural education. So through platforms like YouTube and Instagram, we are able to do that, and it's allowed for simply browsing through a post or a feed and an internet search that you can actually have access to information in the form of tutorials, guides, and lists, as well as sort of infographics. So outside of architecture education, I noticed once I graduated in 2019, how how much I sort of picked up in terms of skills, resources, and information that I picked up as a student. But more importantly, I noticed how little there was information out there for children and students to know more about what it means to be in design and to become an architect. And so I started a architecture blog called The Architecture Experiment as a way of sharing what I had learned, but also what I would have found helpful before I ventured into the architecture degree. So I'm coming across ArchiMake sort of 10 weeks ago. And I realized just how much we were able to introduce architecture at such a young age and how fun and accessible architecture education can be and learning design skills can be. And so I found myself actually saying, I wish this kind of workshop was available for when I was growing up. So in the years of sort of lockdowns and quarantines, it left me questioning, so what is the role of social media? So with at-home learning, is sort of one way social media has allowed us access through our devices such as phones, computers, and tablets. And so children can now learn how to, for example, learn how a building is constructed or how to draw specific architectural drawings as just some of the many things that they can now do at home. It's also an opportunity for resource sharing. And so when architects and architecture students share resources, like where they find reliable learning material on a particular design process, whether it's sort of a physical or digital format, children can now learn about architecture that's specific to their interests and their skills. So if they're wanting to develop drawing skills, model making skills, photography, and more, they can do that without being accompanied by the overwhelming information that can be found sort of when you're not aware of sort of where you can find this information. And also social media tailors for different learning formats, for different learning styles. So we don't need to be in a classroom and we don't need to have a textbook. Being able to learn through video, fun infographics, or written guides and lists are some of the many ways social media has been able to make it easier to distill information in ways that are playful and visually digestible. So if you couldn't go to school anymore, as many have over the last few months, can I still learn design and problem solving skills at home? So the first format of learning that I found crucial was through videos. When social media comes in the form of videos, children can learn, just like in these tutorials, how to use a specific software, drawing, or even insight into the profession as an architect throughout an architect's working day. And sort of these are examples of YouTube channels and also ArchiMake who've provided tutorials and question and answers in a way that makes video a great platform for tailoring to learning different learning styles. So yeah, so when information is thrown through written guides and lists, we're giving children the opportunity to understand the experience of architecture, the skills you do learn, as well as specific design skills, like these examples where architecture graduates and students have decided to share content for the purpose of sharing their information and communicating with students who have an interest in architecture prior to being in the architecture and education at degree level. So more and more architecture graduates and students have been able to share in real time the learning that they had made, the skills in order to learn. Sorry, more and more architects and graduates, as well as students, have been able to share their real-time learning and has made sort of architecture more of an understandable realm. And this is sort of where I believe the role of social media has played. You can learn how to use software or drawing skills at a much earlier age at your own pace and still have fun in the process. You can learn the soft skills, the insights, and the information from architecture students through sort of fun infographics like sort of content creators have done in these examples. So in summary, when social media comes in the form of videos, written guides, and how-to illustrations and infographics, the intimidation of what can appear as complicated design processes is easier to follow and to learn from. It's acknowledging and tailoring to different learning styles. It's also allowing for students it's tailoring to children, students and professionals alike. Starting a blog and an Instagram page has shown me how little information is out there, but that there's more that we can continue to do as professionals and architecture students in sharing our own resources, tutorials and guides, so that we can bridge the gap of the skills and information that is accessible. And it makes it becomes more inclusive for all age groups to interact and develop an interest in architecture in ways that are creative and fun. And lastly, social media has been one of the many ways we are allowing children to develop not only an understanding, but also the skills in which we can venture into an architecture education. So if you're a professional or a student, your ability to share information through blogs, YouTube videos, and infographics is crucial, as it will help transmit your own expertise and knowledge of architecture and design in ways that are creative and easier to grasp, even for the youngest of minds. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nilda. That was really, really insightful. And I believe that it's actually a very truly inclusive platform, isn't it, with social media, as there's no, apart from the device being a financial barrier, other than that, it's actually a free resource, which is one of the key barriers socially that we have to face with education. So that's a really great overview you just gave. Thank you. So we're going to go on to our final chapter of the evening, which is developing life skills through design. And we have now handing over to Chai Roberts. And Chai is the head of foundation at the School of Art, Architecture and Design. And Chai previously taught in undergraduate and postgraduate architecture at London Met for over 20 years. Before this, she combined practice as a designer maker in London with teaching on the undergraduate wood, metal, plastics and ceramics course at Brighton Polytechnic. So I'd like to hand over now to Chai, who will be talking about design as one of 3 creative practices. Thank you, Chai.
Hi, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. I'm sure it's on its way.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you see it now?
Yes, it's all there. Good.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me along. I'd like to jog through my slides quite quickly. What I'm going to do is explain a little bit about what the foundation course does, which is a level that the students might go to after they've been to school. I did a foundation course myself before going on to Kingston University and then to Goldsmiths University, and then as Cheryl said, I did a furniture, I was a furniture designer maker before starting to teach, and then I taught in the architecture school. So I think it's really relevant to running the foundation course that I've been around a bit and done various practices and work with different people, because that kind of diversity of experience, not just the social justice dimension of diversity, but the diversity of different ways of thinking from people's different backgrounds, is an important part of the course. What's also important is the context in which we're working, and I'm sure many of you know of Ken Robinson's 2006 talk to schools kill creativity, and many of us would answer yes to that. And for someone who runs a foundation course, this is a very important context, because I can see that in many ways, in many schools, there is an understanding and a support of creativity, but generally, over the past, I've been in higher education now for 30 years. I would say that students' understanding and experience of creativity is greatly diminished, and we are starting from a starting point further back for many students. So I relish what's happening with Archimake. So we ask the students straight away a basic question, which is, are you creative? And we ask for evidence of their creativity in their portfolios, as many of you know. But it's an important question because culturally, there is an interest in creativity. A lot of young people are very taken by creativity, but this doesn't mean that they can do it. And so part of our filtering on the foundation course is to try and find out the difference between those who can actually do it and are interested in doing it, and those that are just interested in kind of consumers of creativity, in a way, I would call it. Of course, another great influence is kind of Bloom's taxonomy, which underlies a lot of education in this country, across the world, indeed. And I think this is very important. Even this triangle is very important, with this tiny little pyramid of creativity at the top. And a lot of our experience of education is influenced by this, the idea that there is this large amount of knowledge that you have to be exposed to, and that you have to remember it and then understand it. And once you have gone through these levels, then you are allowed, in fact, to create. In the new taxonomy itself, it talks about that learners should begin to can only begin to create once they reach the top of this pyramid. And I've lost my screen here because I've got images of us on one side, but the other is a quote from Oren Shreve, where they talk about that the whole purpose of art and design education, of course, is to create new things. As a starting point. From day one, we're asking people to be creative. So it's not a matter of inverting the triangle like with a small amount of creativity, but having that creativity as the large base of activity for students. Part of what we do is also go into much more detail about what creativity is for the students. This is higher education after all. So there's these complex, a much more complex image of what creativity is, that it's not linear or hierarchical, but it's this entanglement. This is Tina Selig's fantastic diagram of innovation, which obviously has a relation to creativity and itself, and how it's a dynamic relationship between lots of different things. I think this compares to a certain creativity that's taught at school, especially many A-level art portfolios that I've seen, where students are effectively creating work like other people. And that is seen as a measure of their own creativity. Seeing portfolios where they are quite original or individual or even personal examples of creativity is relatively rare. So we're interested in the imagination, the creative imagination, about installing this idea or allowing the idea of things that are new or more dramatically destroying one gestalt in favour of a better one. This kind of philosophical approach sometimes is a surprise to the students who think they might be doing what they do at school. We're really interested in the individual, the person themselves, and their experience of their own creativity as well. The visceral experience of their own creativity. Flow is just one example of this, where we're asking students to reflect on how they feel, not on an emotional level, but understanding the dimensions of their own creativity. This is an interesting list, which has been quite important to Foundation at the beginning of the year and across the year. This is the students fall into these basic 4 categories. That's always been quite useful to us, and I want to share with you. So we have students who know what they want to do, and they go on to do it. We have students who know what they want to do and they change their minds over the course of the Foundation year. We have students who don't know what they want to do. They know they're creative, and during the course they find or decide what it is that they want to do. And interestingly, this lovely little category at the end, which always makes the year quite interesting, is that we have students who don't know what they want to do at the beginning, and at the end of the course they still don't know what they want to do. But with the course, we hope that they are clear about what kind of creativity they might move into. This is an example as well. I mean, read this through yourselves while I'm talking, that we present to the students as well. dyslexia is most common in creative circumstances. You know, the tutors, 80% of the tutors have some form of dyslexia, and that's reflected in the students. And it's almost as if dyslexia, for instance, not to be superficial about dyslexia in any way, but it's almost a qualification for getting on the course, because it's an example of thinking differently, which in certain circumstances is regarded quite negatively. But if you put a student or those behaviours or those understandings in a different context, they can be regarded much more positively. So part of the course is a wide-ranging experience of thinking differently that we expose the students to. We have technical stuff, craft stuff, methods and materials that, of course, that we expose the students to, but we're also interested in getting across to them that there are different kinds of creative practice. Examples here are that of art creative practice, generally useless. It doesn't have to have a purpose. It's highly individual in its introspective creativity, and that we have other much more analytical, convergent. You can see that there are some areas of the school where this is like in architecture and design, where this kind of thinking is more common. And then we have different kinds of design thinking as well, generally highly self-conscious. But the important thing about this is that it produces, I like this phrase, it produces design and then withdraws from the scene. Personality, you sort of effectively use your creativity for other people. So the students are allowed to understand creativity much better. Even the kind of basic thing that all humans are creative. Some people are more creative than others, but specifically on a foundation course, we're now beginning to talk about creativity where you will provide you with a living that they're thinking about a creative practice. So we teach them across the year. We have critical and contextual studies. We have formats, which is about the creative practice, what creativity is specifically. And then there is studio that starts off mostly with technique and ends up with the students being in control of their own projects. This is quite common across foundation. And just to wrap up, what the students who started not knowing what they were doing and still don't know what they want to do at the end, this is the kind of thing that's important to them, that they understand that there is an art practice, that there is a design practice, and within our school there is the architecture practice that exists within the professional realm. The methods, materials, the purpose, the meaning, the context, and how these are interpreted runs through each of these three strands. But the students are beginning to find an understanding of their own practice and where they would feel more comfortable. This is my last slide. And because it's a complex area for the students to make a decision in. So we have the entry into the routes into the foundation course, where we have 18 different courses, which have, including foundation year. We divide them up into two groups that are essentially different kinds of art practice, and they will go on to 3 different areas of the school. So it's a complex landscape that the students need to feel that at the end of the foundation course, they are making an informed choice about their direction ahead. That's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jay. Really fantastic that you've managed to condense that amount of learning into almost 5 minutes. Thank you. I mean, it was really detailed and really great to see how that's actually dealt with in foundation. And the really exciting thing that we were recently in discussion about is that there's talk that maybe Archimate might be able to even lead into a course like a foundation if we manage to make partnerships with someone who may be giving us a level 2 in our course, which would be amazing. So we'd love for our students to meet you there. So next I'd like to introduce Kate Westbrook. And Kate is the Schools Programme Coordinator at the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. And she would like to talk to you about what can design professionals learn from teaching children about their practice. So Kate, I'm really pleased to have you here this evening. If you'd like to take the stand.
Of course. Let me share my screen. There we go. That all right? Everyone can see it? Good, great. So yeah, I'm going to be talking. I was lucky enough to join at the last minute actually, so it means I got to see what other things people were talking about, and I thought this was kind of an interesting thing to talk about that's slightly different. I'm just going to be talking about what can design professionals in my job at the moment, that's architects, but it can be any design professional, learn from teaching children about their practice, and kind of how do you help design professionals learn how to teach. That's going to be the general thing. So just to give you a bit of background about me, I'm at the YEEA Learning team at the moment, but I've previously been at Design Museum, Beaux Arts and Film Academy working on schools programmes. I've also been a class teacher in a primary school in Stratford. So I kind of come from an education and museum background, and just a nice picture of all the kind of work I've done is across the realm, you know, of creativity, as we've been talking about today, not just architecture. So the case study I'm going to use for this is one of our kind of flagship programmes at YEEA. It's one strand of our National Schools programme, which is the YEEA Architecture Ambassadors in Schools. So it's a national programme. We work at the moment from Cumbria to Plymouth. We're going to Wales in autumn, yay! And we've worked over the years with over 600 architecture professionals, and we train them up, we mentor them to deliver custom creative workshops in schools. And these are people with all different kind of varying levels of understanding of working with children and young people, people who've never engaged with a young person or talked about their work to a young person before. So we're kind of working with that mixed ability, as we talked about, or mixed achievers, as I would like to say. My light's gone off anyway. So we also have been doing a digital programme during COVID, kind of forced the issue, but I do think it's something that we hope to continue. That's really important to us in terms of our national reach and making sure we're kind of continuing to go to rural areas and things. We have 30 partnerships plus each term around the UK, and it's really important that everything we do is about hands-on activity. It's not about architects standing at the front of the room and delivering a careers lecture. That's not what we're about. We're about learning by doing. And the way that we do that is through partnerships with the teacher, really close kind of working relationships with the teacher, supported by the YEEA Learning team. So this is a kind of strategy for how we help design professionals learn how to teach. And I'm really sorry, there's a huge chunk of text, but there's quite a lot there. So our training includes, and it really importantly includes, core teaching skills and tools and tips and tricks of the trade that can support their teaching. So they're really getting a kind of crash course in how to be a teacher. And obviously, as Anna was talking about, it's really different when you're working in a digital platform than an in-person in-school workshop. We assess their needs as a learner. We work out what kind of person they are. Sometimes that's a kind of quick assessment. Sometimes that's through conversations with them and sort of self-assessment. And we think about how we can help them improve their teaching. So we encourage them to kind of be positive about their self-reflection, not to be self-critical, take the pressure off. Architects can be incredibly self-critical. They're used to the crit. They're used to kind of criticising everything they do and chopping it up and saying that's wrong, but actually sometimes we see really great skills in them that we want to foster. We want them to see that in themselves. We provide frameworks and inspiration, so things like lesson plans and medium-term frameworks. You know, for example, if you've been given a chunk of curriculum time, how can you chop up a series of workshops to fit that, and case studies and ideas. Yeah, just to add for that, the reason we have these kind of all of these different sorts of frameworks that they are able to use and play with is because the Architecture Ambassadors Programme is completely custom. Every single Architecture Ambassador partnership ends up in a different workshop or a different series of workshops or a different relationship. It can be a one-day blast of activity to a 6-week course of after-school workshops. So it's really different, and it can be curriculum linked, or it can be totally focused on architecture or building a skill. So we give them these frameworks. They usually look at them, get some inspiration, chuck them away and do their own thing, because they're creative, and that's the really enjoyable bit of this process for them. We encourage fun, joy, creativity, and just having a go. They can only learn by doing, and it will be engaging and satisfying when they find enjoyment in the learning process themselves. So it's kind of encouraging maybe people who are used to trying to be show things that are always really perfect. We always find architects' presentations as the most beautiful things in the world, and actually sometimes the children go off on a completely different tangent and they can't use the next 10 slides because they've just got into a conversation, and that's where the workshop goes. And we sort of have to encourage them to see that that's fine and that's okay, and that's the way that things sometimes work, especially when working with children, young people. Another really important part of this, sorry my camera's a bit blurry, is that we also foster these positive partnerships between the design professionals and those who work with the children. So in this case, it's the teachers, which is based around trust and learning from each other. And it's something that when I was working in school, we called that kind of thing, that's your reciprocal relationship of learning. We called it a learning community. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that because I think it's something that's quite interesting. So the REBA Architecture Ambassadors Learning Community has 3 parties within it. And the focus of the learning community together is to deliver the best, most exciting, most engaging curriculum linked or standalone project that really works for the specific children that we are working with. So in the 3 people in this relationship are the educator, the teacher. They are an expert in student needs. They bring the understanding of the curriculum. They do know how to fit creativity into the curriculum, despite all the kind of teacher bashing. They can do it and they're amazing at it. They've got teaching skills and an understanding of how their specific group learns, all of their needs, the people who need to be stretched and pushed, the people who need a little bit more scaffolding to get to the point where they can join in. So they're really important in these partnerships. We also have the design professional, who in this case is the architect. They're an expert in the design industry. They've got design skills and understanding. They are inspiring, they're exciting, they can bring images of the work they've done. They've got the know-how of the actual content. We also have the learning specialist, which is our REBA learning team, and we're the kind of translator. We train, we help negotiate the relationships between these two, and kind of the connection between the professional and education worlds. And we kind of mentor and support through the process, and we also evaluate the project. We don't evaluate anyone individually, we evaluate the project and look at how it has worked. The great thing about working in this way is we're using the expertise of all the parties to deliver engaging, tailored learning with the child at the heart of the programme design. It is about open conversation and discussion. Immediately, that's the first thing we do. Well, as soon as we train our architects, we get them connected with the teachers. We start that conversation. It's a spark. It gets going. The ideas start sparking, and it kind of, we foster that kind of discussion. It's about everybody learning and sharing skills. It's a shared responsibility. No one person in that kind of ecosystem is entirely responsible for the outcomes of what happens. We share a responsibility, and it's about that kind of mentoring and collaboration to get there. When we're evaluating the programme, and we're not evaluating the individual. That's why it works so nicely to work together in this way. We're looking at what worked and what didn't work with the programme, changing things, fixing things, and it's not about anybody changing the way they do things. It's about people looking at the programme as a whole, which takes the pressure off. So in kind of summary, these are some of the kind of quotes that I've had from architects about what they actually learned from the experience of taking part in delivering creative architecture workshops in schools and being part of this partnership where they learn how to teach, where they work closely with the teacher, they gain the skills, they gain the experience, whether it's in the classroom or online. These are kind of key areas that I sort of noticed comments kind of coming in. So communication obviously is a massive one, and it's something that architects have to do in their roles. It's really important. So these are kind of comments that they've made. They realise they now know how to help others understand what we do, which can be really complex. Architecture is a complicated profession with a huge multidisciplinary range. So it is difficult to, it's not just drawing buildings, it's huge. So if they can learn how to explain to other people what they do with specificity, then it means that they've kind of really learned how to communicate that well. So that's great. They've learned new ways to present in order to keep people interested while still delivering the relevant information. We always talk about kind of taking the key information. That's really important. Presentation skills, verbal and visual, thinking about the salient points, the key points you want to get across, and how to break up explanation of difficult tasks into manageable chunks. That's always a tricky one if they've got a complex idea for a project that they want to create with the young people, or a specific skill they want them to learn. For example, plan elevation section, which is quite a complex thing to explain. if they can learn how to scaffold that so that the students understand the steps by step of the process, that is a really valuable skill to then take forward when they're working with other people who aren't specialists, for example, clients. So other thing is confidence, so not so worried about public speaking, learning how to command the room and draw attention. When you're teaching, you have to stand there, you have to take attention, you can't just whisper or do one-to-one, you need to speak to the room, especially we often have projects where they'll start by addressing a large assembly of 90 kids and then going individually into classrooms, so they have to be able to take on that challenge, and they do it really well in this project. Relationship building has been a huge theme, and I think that's amazing. So team bonding, engaging with the public and young people, so outside of their team, but also new relationships and interesting collaborations between different departments. We talked a little bit about it not just being about one part of the built environment, it's how the built environment works together as this ecosystem. All parts of that kind of ecosystem are important, and actually if young people can see that engineers and planners and architects and interior designers and landscape architects all work together in a team, that's really important. And they might never be architects in the end, but if they see that it's really exciting and interesting and affects them, and they feel they have a voice about the built environment, that is really great outcome from this. It reinforces a sense of camaraderie in our team. That's just really nice to know that they feel that the project has brought them together. And the other thing that's I've kind of hinted upon, but we see again and again, is this continuation of learning after the fact of taking part in these workshops. Helped me go on to explain difficult concepts to clients. Lessons learned were passed on to others in the organisation, so they were then going on to teach others about what they had learned. And then this is a really nice one. I want to take part next year to work with a different kind of school and take on a new challenge. They want to continue improving their teaching. So I'm just going to stop there because I was trying to rush through, but thank you so much. And yeah, please do get in touch. I've left my details here.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was really insightful. And it's very important to raise awareness of actually that learning does go two ways. And that's something which we find really valuable, and that's what actually motivates us to keep going, because we're always learning in this process. I'm going to introduce now Neil Pinder, our last speaker, and I'm aware that we're unfortunately going to be running over, and obviously I understand that some of you may need to leave at 8 o'clock. I don't think Neil is able to do his talk in probably 1.5 minutes, so I think if you're okay to stay for a short while longer, possibly till 8:15, I think, then that would be great. And perhaps we can allow for, if one or two of you have a question, we might have time for that before we round up this evening. So if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A, use the Q&A button at the bottom so that we can then select your question. So finally, Neil. Neil is an educator and founder of Celebrating Architecture and Homegrown Plus, and he's also an award-winning product design teacher. And I'm really pleased to have you here, Neil, and to be able to share with us your experience of this working in this field. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me here. I'm loving it. I know the match begins in 1.5 minutes, so if I had a chance of finishing it in 1.5 minutes, I would have done, trust me, right? But first of all, listen, there's so many good things that you could take feedback from the engagement. And the main thing is that I've gleaned from everybody, to quick summarize, is everybody has got passion about what they actually do, for who they deliver it to. And it's this want to engage with young people, be they from primary, secondary, going up to university level. And it's all the programs that they've devised to engage and enthuse young people to get involved in. And I particularly like Katya's program, where she's reaching out across the world, and then after bringing it back to England and getting people from the UK looking at all these different rooms done in such a graphical way that it communicates everything in just one go. When you look across the room, you can see color, diversity, and everything else. So I absolutely love that. So that's my quick summarization. Basically, Celebrating Architecture. If I share my screen, I'll just do a quick one. let me see, I should have it up there. There it is. And then I share the screen, right? So celebrating architecture is was devised by myself and a fantastic architect called Venetia Wolfenden, who basically used to work with Open City, and she's an architect herself of, I wouldn't say considerable years because it make her feel ancient, but she's not that old. So, but she's absolutely fantastic. And what Venetia does is I come up with ideas, she comes up with ideas, and we sit there and we talk like endlessly and put things together. So this is just the draft project that we have done based on the pavilion project for young children. And basically it's about how youth centres have basically disappeared. And so what we're trying to do is to get young people to engage and think about how they would like to hang out in the space and what they want their space to be. We usually take it at this, well, a bit later in June, July, we usually take it around to different pavilions around London, and then we make up a toolkit and then get the kids to put the toolkit together in whatever way they see possible. So that is, and this is a draft at the moment because we've got, this is about 117 pages that we put together, and I'm actually carrying out a sort of a dry run in school. Then I'll go back to Venetia and we'll sit and we'll work out, iron out all the bits that we have to take out or little bits that we may have to add in. So we teach people just basically, you know, this is our interpretation of the 6 fundamentals of architecture, and we give them this slide and we just get each student, each group, because they're all divided into architectural teams. And so what we do is we get them to have a project. Somebody's creative, somebody's good at math, somebody good at writing, someone who's good at presenting their work, standing up and everything. And we get them to look at how they can design their pavilion, but taking all of these 6 fundamentals of architecture into consideration. So that is a quick one, but it's been really, really successful. We've been supported by the GLA and various other organisations, architectural organisations. So that is celebrating architecture, and we try to give out awards to basically, not that you're the best or you're the greatest, but it's just we give every student a little badge of celebrating architecture to show that they're actually absolutely valued in their ideas, and their creativity is really, really worth them putting all the effort and motivation into it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and tell you a little bit about Homegrown Plus. Homegrown Plus grew out of the fact that I had so many young architects who were going into architectural school, and they were from non-traditional and traditional backgrounds. And so what that meant is that they were like myself when I went to art school. I didn't know anyone, anything, didn't know anything about the sort of bureaucracy, and there is a political bureaucracy of the art world. I didn't know anything about that. But what Homegrown Plus is, it's the alumni group, and we tool them up with the skills to orientate themselves around university, college applications, job applications, etc., etc. So Homegrown Plus is connected to over 40 different universities of architecture around and creativity around England. And more recently, as you'll find out in a couple of minutes, we're venturing out abroad. They are directly made a conscious effort to connect to students, not to lecturers, because lecturers, in my view, when I started to connect them in the beginning, they just kicked me into the long ball. So through social media, and I know that you had 2 guys who spoke really good about social media. So I'm on LinkedIn, so I connect with them on LinkedIn, and they connect with me. And if students have got need any help, I connect them to other students via LinkedIn. And so we're forming this circular economy of education, which is really, and it's a collaborative form of circular economy of education. So we're also connected to over 40 different architectural practices. So I can ring up different people who I know in the architectural practice directly. Say, for example, I ring up Paul Karakusevich or Karakusevich Karsh and say, look, can you help me out here? I need a student to have some portfolio work done, and they will hand me over to a fantastic person called Madeline, and she would sort everything out for me. The same thing with Assemble, HTA, and so on and so forth. And the next thing is that the pluses are, which I must state, as all of their friends, that they say, oh, Neil can do this, or he knows this person, etc., etc. So they send me their pluses, and then we become one big family. Oh, before, I'm going to rewind a second, because without this, I wouldn't be possible without the fantastic lady sitting in the corner, Her Majesty Victoria Thornton. Basically, she's the reason why I'm here, because I connected to her years ago, and she just said, yeah, get involved in this, and sent me stuff. And I used to annoy her all the time, phone her up all the time, but she stuck with me all the way through. She's even connected to me now, right? And I'm a trustee of a charity, the Thornton Educational Trust, which you're going to find out about it. But and I think I'm doing good for time, but I'm going to show you just one initiative where we've gone global, and it's called, it was an initiative derived from one of my students who was in year 11 at the time, and she wanted to put a portfolio together just to try out to go to colleges and see what they thought of it. She was a textile student, and apparently she went to one college and they said, oh, you'll never get in. She wanted to get in CSM, Central St. Martin's, but they said to her, oh, you'll never get in Central St. Martin's with that. So she came back to me very disheartened. I said, don't worry. And the kids know that in my lessons, I play music. In my Zoom lessons, I play music, from jazz to hip hop to blues, every sort of music I play to enthuse them. And so they know I love designers. So I wear my designer belts, my Gucci, my Louis Vuitton. So I had 7 architectural students, 7 fashion students, and I merged them together. And then we came up with this with another couple of fantastic architects, a guy called Ramzi Yasser, and Venetia was involved, and now it's just spread globally. And we're doing a Glam Goes Global Summer Ball. So if you guys want to design some wearable architecture, 17th and 18th of July, just come join me, and you'll see you can make anything. Oh, and it's totally sustainable. So the even playing field, like what Katja's done, making everything out of sustainable material or recycling, upcycling, that's what it's made at. So there's a total level playing field. So last week, I've got the Gambia involved, who I've got a school there who are going to get involved in this, and they're going to make some wearable architecture as sustainable byproducts that they have in their house. And we're supported, the first supporting this year, e.g. money, is from the Pratt Institute in New York, which is a fantastic Harriet Harris. But this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to share you our clip of Glam Goes. So we always make little movies. We make at the end, at the beginning, to promote our Glam Goes Global. We're in the process of doing the summer one. So here is, can you all see that screen? Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Good. Just pray to God that the volume works. Turn your speakers up, and here we go. Right, so that is just a final clip, and we make videos to go out at the beginning and make videos to go out at the end. If you've got any questions, just please, you could DM me on LinkedIn, you could get me. And by the way, Clubhouse is absolutely fantastic. We host a room, I host a room on Friday nights in Clubhouse, and we also do Clubhouse on other forums. So please link into us, and I know that everybody here is fully community and they want to contact with each other. So just let's spread the word that celebrate art, that creativity changes lives, and creativity also saves lives. Have a fantastic day. I'm done.
Thank you, Neil. That was great. I'm glad you squeezed in some cool music there. And I have to say, the really interesting thing is, prior to entering architecture, my my goal was to be a fashion designer. So, you know, you've married up those, and I totally understand the three-dimensional tailoring. It's all there. So we've come to the end, and I would just like to thank everybody for amazing talks that you've given, and in very short period of time. So I appreciate that we wanted to try to give a really broad overview today. And I'd like to ask if there's anybody who has a question to please pop it in the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of the screen. And we may just be able to keep everybody sat in their seats for another few minutes if you're quick. And I would, whilst we're waiting just to see if there's anything that comes up, I'd just like to say that, you know, I've noted down so many things during this talk, but one of the first things I mentioned, which actually we came full circle with Neil's talk, is that in Victoria's talk, you mentioned a little bit about you know, the community engagement, social impact, and I've worked with community engagement also. I've done community consultation projects, and the surprising thing for me was that all the voices that came forward through the community consultation were actually all of the people who would probably have found their, you know, higher education route without us being there. So the interesting thing was that the non-traditional students were the ones that we didn't manage to reach. And I think what would be really great to know or to put out there to what we have panelists is, how do you think we can actually do these social projects and find ways of connecting to those audiences who really are not the traditional student profile? Because you know, quite often those families who know the benefit and know the value of what we're offering, they're the first to grab it by two hands, especially if it's free. And often the ones who don't come forward are the ones who actually are the ones who need it most. So what would you say we might want to do to change that?
It's actually a problem I really had with the Doll's House project at the beginning. We used to do open workshops, and it was always, you were always preaching to the converted. So we've really gone out to specific charities who work with specific people and have worked with them for longer to really make sure that we reach the right people. And I always try to find art teacher or whatever locally who really know the groups. And then you have to make sure, of course, you're very respectful and everything, but it's the only way, I think, to reach people. I think open drop-in workshops are great fun, but you don't reach the people you want to reach.
Yeah, thank you, Katja. That's great. So ultimately, you could working with a mediator who has the right audience is a really good way. And Kate, you have your hand up.
I was just going to echo what you're kind of talking about, and Katja was saying, is that that's how our programme works. And like, I think I probably highlighted how important teachers are. Like, they are the key to young people. And if you can find ways to like capture their enthusiasm, they have our audiences there that we're trying to communicate with. And it's so important to find ways of, you know, even if it means you have to be sneaky and you have to look at the curriculum and find quick little funny ways of putting architecture in there, or using architecture as a tool to teach the curriculum, which Neil knows everything about. But it's like, they are absolutely invaluable to us, and we wouldn't be able to do it without our teachers. They're so important for that.
Laughing about Chai's cats because I
Cat's taking over. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else has any comments on how we can overcome the you know. Yeah, Neil.
Yeah, so another way of doing it is collaborating with practices. So what I do is I collaborate with architectural practices who are doing social value projects. And so then they get me in to deliver the EDIs to the actual, say, a school. So at the moment we're working, collaborating with a school where we're going to go in there, and it's in quite a challenging area, but that is the way I think we can do it. And as Adrian Lahoud said in one of my films I did a couple of years ago, we've got to make it so that diversity engagement isn't a tick box exercise. Because as soon as it becomes a tick box exercise, then you know that the practices who are engaged are only doing it because they just want to get the job, but they don't really care about the indigenous people around the area, and they're not taking their social responsibility to the full extent. They're not taking it seriously. The only thing they're taking seriously is how much bucks they're going to make from a particular project at the end of the day. And that's what we got to change, that narrative, and get more community engagement projects going. Yeah. Serious community engagement projects.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. I think that yeah, working closely with communities and teachers who have a broad range of diverse kind of groups within their schools, that's definitely a good place to start. So I think that well, we are definitely now 8:15. So as much as I have a whole load of questions I would love to ask you all, I am aware that, you know, it is the evening and we've all been sitting on this computer for a good period of time today. So I am going to wrap up, as much as I would love to, you know, continue to quiz everybody and ask for your suggestions on how we can continue to improve our practice. But I'd like to say just thank you to everybody for attending today. Thank you very much to Victoria Thornton for your great keynote speech. And thank you very much to Finn Johnson and Katie Van Dawson and Katja de Haas, Anna Uru, and sorry, I've got them all written down here, and Makira Watson, Nilda Hanchoe, Chai Roberts, Kate Westbrook, and Neil Pinder. And I'd like to say that I hope we can manage to continue this as a, you know, an ongoing conversation amongst us, and continue to draw other people in who are doing really interesting things. And let's have this as being a start of many.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. I'm off. It's 0-0 still, so 15 minutes gone. It's gone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Okay.
Have a lovely
Thank
one,
you
everyone.
much, everybody.
Lovely to meet you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.